All right, it's 6:35, and we'll go ahead and get started. Deuteronomy. If you look at the syllabus, we were supposed to cover the first 7 chapters last week. All we really got into was a lot of the introduction. So we're going to have to get in here and start flying, okay? So that's just the way it's going to be. I am going to spend a little bit more time on the first part of it to emphasize if you were in a Jewish situation, what it would be like if you were actually offering these animals. And so I would, and again, remember that what we studied last week as an introduction was always pointing to Christ. Remember, one of the first things I said was, whenever you're studying the Bible, always look for Christ in every book of the Bible. Always look and see how this is applicable to Christ and how Christ fulfilled these things. So if that helps you in that respect, that's going to help you to understand these books and these things a little bit more. And maybe, just maybe, we won't get so bogged down in the details that we zone out. I don't want to do that. So, and again, if I'm doing that, stop me or try to tell me to kind of speed it up a little bit more. I want to make it interesting, but at the same time, I don't want to get so bogged down that we miss it. And that's what I'm going to try to do tonight, is to go through a lot of these offerings and start talking about what exactly. And I'm going to spend a little bit more time maybe on the first 2 or 3 to kind of get that idea. Everybody gets the idea of what would happen in this respect. All right, but before we go any further, let's begin with a word of prayer. I'm grateful, Father, for this day, and I'm grateful for the fact that I have the opportunity to teach your word, and there's people here that want to know it. So often, Lord, we don't study and really grasp your word like we know we need to, and we just humbly ask you, Father, to please be with us and help us open our hearts to understand these things, to understand what it would have been like at that time, to cause us, Lord, to be even that much more grateful for what your Son did for us on the cross. I'm grateful for every one of my students. I pray, Lord, your richest blessings on them. I pray that I might be able to make this interesting and at the same time, Lord, impact all of us to really get across to us what's happening and why these things happen. Bless us, be with us, take care of us, Father. Be with those that are bereaving over the loss of loved ones. Be with those that are struggling in so many different ways right now. Father, we are grateful that Jesus came and says, "Come unto me, all you that labor and are heavy laden, and you will give us rest." Right now, Lord, we need a lot of rest. Help us to rest in you. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. The first 7 chapters is going to be talking about, as I said before, the various offerings that would have been offered if you were a Jew at that moment in time. So he starts off, "Now the Lord called to Moses." Remember, this is God saying this. So this is an inspired book, which is another reason why we need to be doing this. Again, Exodus 40 ended with the idea of the tabernacle being established. Now they're going to go through the routines of what happens whenever man wants to come into the presence of God. And I think one of the things I tried to point out last week, the best way that I knew how, was the idea of the amount of blood that would be shed. You start off, he says, "Speak to the children of Israel, say to them, when any of you brings an offering to the Lord, you shall bring an offering of the livestock, of the herd and of the flock. If his offering is a burnt sacrifice, let him offer a male without blemish. He shall offer it of his own free will." So, number one, as he offers this burnt offering, number one, it had to be a male. Number two, it had to be of his own free will. This is something that he wants to do. Now, we will find later the sin offerings, the peace offerings, the trespass offerings, and how those would be required if they wanted to come back into that right relationship with God. But here is a situation where a man is going to be, just because he wants to serve God and honor God, he's offering this burnt offering. You've got to realize this has to be a male without blemish, probably one of the best animals that he had. He is at the door of the tabernacle of meeting before the Lord. So this would be right outside the curtains, as it was. It would say the door would be those curtains that would come back and forth. So this would be outside. That's where the altar of burnt offering would be. And notice, he said he puts his hand on the head of the burnt offering, and it would be accepted on his behalf. Why does he put his hand on the head of the burnt offering? Number one, to suggest the idea, this is where, again, especially when it comes to the sin offerings, the trespass offerings, he would be in essence confessing those sins over this particular offering. Here in this situation, he's just giving his are giving this to them and to make atonement for them. Now, what does the word atonement mean? It means at one-ment. We're at one with God. So they want to come into the presence of God. They may have something on their minds. They may have something on their heart. It may be a thanksgiving offering. It may be something where he's just grateful for the fact that God has blessed him with wonderful herds and a great family. There's just so many things that could be involved that would happen in this burnt offering. So he would put his hands on it, and then he shall kill the bull before the Lord. And the priest, Aaron's son, shall bring the blood and sprinkle the blood all around on the altar. This would be the altar where they actually offer the sacrifice that is by the door of the tabernacle of meeting. And he shall cut the skin shall skin the burnt offering and cut it into its pieces. Part of this is, yes, the man, we do get that idea that this man who brought this male without blemish, he's the one that kills it, okay? Now the question is, and this is interesting as you're reading some commentaries here, the question is the he, and I think it is the he still the guy offering the sacrifice, or has now the priest come into play? When I first read this, I believe it was still the guy that was offering the sacrifice. So he would not only kill the animal, the priest would catch the blood, sprinkle it on the altar round about, then he would have to turn around and skin the animal. All righty? Then, this is where you pick up in verse 7, the sons of Aaron shall put fire on the altar. So to me, again, and again, depending on who you read, some people say that the priest have to skin the animal, but I'm thinking he's talking about the offerer skins the animal, okay? And the sons of Aaron, the priest, shall put fire on the altar, lay the wood in order on the fire. Then the priest, Aaron's sons, shall lay the parts, the head, the fat in order on the wood that is on the fire. He shall wash its entrails and its legs with water, and the priest shall burn all on the altar as a burnt sacrifice, an offering made by fire, a sweet aroma to the Lord. Well, let's talk about this for just a few moments. Number one, this animal, the entire animal would be burned. This is why it's called the burnt offering. So this whole animal has been dedicated to God. Notice the ideal in verse 9 where he says this is a sweet aroma to the Lord. Does God want to smell animals cooking? Is that what really makes him rejoice? It's not that as much as he sees a man and his family offer the very best that he had to God, and that would be something that would please God because this man is free will offering it of his own self. Now, I want you to think about again how that applies in the Christian age. Jesus freely offered all of himself. That wasn't a burnt offering, obviously, but he freely offered himself. And if we're following the life of Christ, what do? We are to, again, think about it in this respect. We are to offer all of ourselves, right? We can't hold anything back. Every part of that has to be offered in that respect. The term that designates this offering is the word holah, which means that's what rises or ascends, okay? So now what would happen after this animal skinned, Aaron's sons lays it on the altar, and that would be a man in that situation that had the ability, maybe because again, he was a cattle farmer, raised cattle, so this is what he would offer. But now suppose somebody a little bit not quite as wealthy. They've got goats or sheep. Same thing's happening here. Notice he shall kill, again, a male without blemish. As a burnt offering, he shall kill it on the north side of the altar before the Lord. And you've got to remember that whenever you look at the tabernacle, and this is where we were studying in the book of Exodus, you remember the tabernacle always faced the east. All right, so you would actually have this tabernacle, and then right out here in front of it would be this altar where they would offer all of this to the east. So where would he kill the animal? He would kill the animal to the north. Okay, he would kill the animal this way, the east, and this is this, and this is the most holy place. So he would be doing it to the north, and they would then sprinkle this animal in that respect. Now, you think to yourself, well, think about that. Why does that make so much difference? Okay. Okay. The north would be here, right? Yeah. Okay. The reason this is always facing east. This is always facing the east. Tabernacle is always facing east. So that's why I was sitting there thinking northeast, south, or southwest. So, okay. And that's really why I'm drawing it in west that way. Right? I'm just saying. So this is the reason why I thought this would be north and this would be south. So, but yeah, the tabernacle's always facing the east, always set up toward the east. The temple is always set up was built toward the east. So they would have to kill the animal on the north side of it and then cut it into its pieces with its head and its fat. And the priest shall lay them in order on the wood that is on. Now notice, in order. They had to put them in a certain spot. Think about how hot this fire would have to be to burn an entire animal. Think about how, as we continue to go through this, that every morning and every evening, they would offer an animal, burnt offering every morning, every evening. Then these people would bring their sacrifice, and they would be offering again these animals. Think about the amount of blood that's being shed here. And again, he calls this a sweet aroma to the Lord. It's not because, again, he's wanting to smell animal fat. It's because God knows that these people are honestly trying to come to him and worship him in that respect. And then he says, look, here's the third situation. If the burnt offering is offering of birds. Now we remember in Luke chapter 2, whenever, we'll get into this as we're going through Leviticus a little bit further, but when it came to women being purified after their monthly and then also after they had children, they would also have to offer sacrifices. So think about, as we go through all of this, I want you to think about the amount of animals that would be killed in these situations, the amount of blood that would be shed, and how these would be used in a lot of these situations. So if you're not as rich as somebody else, you would bring a bird or two turtle doves, or turtle doves or young pigeons. Notice the word plural, doves or pigeons. And again, they would wring the head off and burn it on the altar. Somebody, for those of you that don't know what wringing a head off is, you would just snap the neck and wring it. I grew up on a chicken farm, so yeah, there was that. Okay, that's another thing. They would wring it off. Again, the blood would be pouring out. The blood would be drained out at the side of the altar. He would remove its crop. Again, for those of you that don't know what the crop is, it's right up in here where the food would be stored. Okay, where the food would be stored. He shall remove its crop and its feathers, cast it beside the altar on the east side into the place for ashes. If you've never had the opportunity to do that, that's a stinking job. I mean, it really is when you're killing chickens or something. It stinks. I don't know any other way to say it than that. He shall split it at the wings, but not divide it completely. And the priest shall burn it on the altar. It's a burnt sacrifice, an offering made by fire, a sweet aroma to the Lord. Chapter 2. All right, so you've got the richer people that's offering cattle. You have the next group, the flocks, the goats, the sheep. Then you would have those that were offering young pigeons. Chapter 2 starts off with a grain offering. Yes? In some of the situations when the whole animal's burnt, obviously not. But as we continue, they completely burn these animals up. Now, these are the burnt offerings. There will be some offerings we will see later where this priest does get certain amounts of that. There's some discussion as to whether or not the priests got the skins of these animals. Think about it again from that point in time. Most people were living or had clothing of animal skin some way or another. So the priest would need that. The priest would get part of the grain offerings. They would get certain parts of these others. So all of this has come in here, and You've got to remember that
They're just burning it up. They're not trying to cook it.
no, they are burning it
Burning it up.
to ash. So, and so again, it suggests the whole consecration, the whole dedication of this animal to the Lord, which again, in the New Testament emphasizes to us of our entire dedication. That's the way it should be with us. All righty. If you're looking in the New King James Version and the King James Version, he says a grain offering. All right. Now, if you're looking in the King James Version, he calls it a meat offering. That's a mistranslation. It should be a meal offering. Okay. And again, there's a Hebrew word there in that respect. So you can't afford a cow. You can't afford the sheep. You're not a sheep farmer. You're not a goat farmer. So you've got these turtle doves. You don't have that. So what other farmers are there? They're the ones that's, harvesting the wheat, the barley, things along that line. So they were required to offer a grain offering to the Lord. One of the things that we remember in Genesis chapter 4 was the fact that God was not pleased with Cain's offering because all he offered was what? All he offered was the grain. But he did accept Abel's offering. Abel offered a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, the Hebrew writer will tell us. Why? Again, because of blood. Because of blood. Now, a lot of these grain offerings would be offered at the same time as these burnt offerings. So you not only would have an animal that would be burnt and totally given to God, but a lot of times these grain offerings would be offered at the same time. They shall pour oil on it, put frankincense on it, bring it to Aaron's sons, and they shall take from it his handful of fine flour and oil with all the frankincense. And the Lord or the priest shall burn it as a memorial on the altar, an offering made by fire, a sweet aroma to the Lord. Here, the rest of the grain offering, it goes back to what you were saying, Carrie, the rest of the grain offering shall be Aaron's and his sons. Now, this specifically is talking about the high priest. This is where the high priest is going to get his food. He's not going to have time. When you think about the amount of, as I said before, the number of people that are coming bringing sacrifices day in and day out.
Like 2 million people.
Yeah, as I said, 1.5 to 3 million people, depending on how you play that out. When you look at every one of them bringing these sacrifices on a day-by-day basis, the priests are not going to have time to go out and, plow fields and take care of animals and do all this other stuff. They have to rely upon the people. Now, later on, what happens is you read through the rest of the text in the Bible, you'll see that sometimes the children of Israel forget to give or choose not to give their portions to the priest. The priests have to go out there and make a living, have to go out there and have food to eat. And this is one of the things that gets God very upset because the priests weren't getting their due. So he said, if you bring an offering of grain offering baked in the oven, it shall be of unleavened cakes. Unleavened. All right, so we think about that idea. We use unleavened bread in the Lord's Supper. Again, a lot of people think that the ideal of leaven suggests the ideal of corruption and that God never would allow. I've actually heard this. God would never allow leaven in any of his sacrifices, but that's not true because we're going to see some of the sacrifices will have leaven in it. But in this particular situation, it does not have any leaven in it. All righty? He says what? Notice, it's baked in the oven, or it's a grain offering baked in a pan. It shall be a fine flour, unleavened, mixed with oil. You shall break it in pieces, pour oil on it. It's a grain offering. And if it's baked in a covered pan, so there's 3 different ways to cook it. You would what? Fry it in a pan. You would bake it in an oven, or you would, again, bake it in a covered pan. There's different ways to cook it. You shall bring the offering, and it shall be presented to the priest, and he shall bring it to the altar. And the priest shall take the grain offering, a memorial portion, burning on the altar. It's an offering made by fire, a sweet aroma to the Lord. Now, what is left of the grain offering shall be Aaron and his sons. It is most holy of the offerings to the Lord made by fire. Now, here's that first word, holy. All right, now I want you to consider again the ideal of this whole book is talking about the ideal of holy, being set apart. So it's most holy. No grain offering, chapter 2, verse 11, shall be brought to the Lord made with leaven. You shall burn no leaven nor any honey in any offering to the Lord made by fire. Okay? Different commentators talk about why not honey. Honey was a staple at that time. I mean, they used that for sweetening and so forth. So there's some question as to why not. We sometimes, again, attach the ideal of, and you see this especially in the New Testament, the ideal of the leaven of sin. Okay, and maybe that's, and so the leaven of sin suggests the ideal of what? If it's contagious as it was. Okay, and that's why you don't cook it that way. But again, you don't really see the reasoning here. It's just that you don't use leaven, period. You don't use honey in these particular cakes that you bake. But you shall offer it seasoned with salt. You shall not allow the salt of the covenant of your God. Now we think about the idea, Jesus talks about that we are the salt of the earth, right? So here again is the idea that God has made a covenant with the children of Israel. They were to allow or to use the salt to cook these grain offerings to God. And he said, with all your offerings you shall offer salt. So again, if you offer a grain offering of your first fruits, you shall offer the grain offering of the first fruit, green heads of grain roasted on the fire, grain beaten from full heads, wheat, rye, put oil on it, lay frankincense on it, and the priest shall burn the memorial portion, part of it, with all the frankincense as an offering made to fire to the Lord. So we have the burnt offerings. We have the grain offerings, are also known as the meal offerings. Now you come to the third one, the peace offerings. Okay? The peace offerings. When you start getting into these situations, you start thinking about the idea of why they would be doing there. The peace offering is actually a fellowship offering that, again, go with me to chapter 7, Leviticus chapter 7, verses 12 through 18. Now you're going to start seeing chapter 3, verse 1, when his offering is a sacrifice of a peace offering. If he offers it of the herd, it shall be male or female, and it shall be offered without blemish to the Lord. Now, pick up with chapter 3, verse 11. This is the law of the sacrifice of peace offerings, which he shall offer to the Lord. If he offers it for a thanksgiving, then he shall offer with a sacrifice unleavened cakes mixed with oil, unleavened wafers anointed with oil, or cakes of blended flour mixed with oil. Besides the cake, he shall offer leavened bread. See that? In this particular situation, he shall offer leavened bread with a sacrifice of thanksgiving of his peace offering. So these peace offerings would have three different kinds, three different reasons, okay? Peace offerings would be used for thanksgiving. In other words, they're thanking God for what God has given them. All righty. Secondly, they would be a votive offering. Now, what is a votive? A votive offering is whenever you fulfill a vow. You make a promise to God, and you fulfill that promise, that vow to God. This would be, you would use a peace offering in that respect. And then there's these free will offerings. Thirdly, the free will offerings. Now, whenever we think of peace offerings, here again, the Hebrew word for that is shalom. All right? And a lot of times that word is used to talk about a problem that maybe people would have with somebody else. So you're here now and you have a problem with God, or God has a problem with you because of some sin. You need to develop or rebuild that relationship, so you would offer these peace offerings, either as thanksgiving to God, fulfill a promise to God, or as a free will offering just because you're grateful for what God has done. Now, in 1 Kings chapter 8, 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 63. When the temple was dedicated by Solomon, 22,000 oxen were killed. 22,000 and 120,000 sheep for the dedication of the temple. And this was a peace offering, thanking God for allowing the temple to be built. 22,000 cows and 120,000 sheep. That's a lot.
Days.
Huh?
It took a days.
It took them days and days and days as they went through this dedicatory celebration. But again, this would be part of the peace offerings that he would offer because of that. And again, I hope you're getting in your mind, and that's what I'm trying to really bring out across here, is the idea that the amount of blood that had to be shed. Let's go back here for just, think about this. The idea, the peace means more than absence of war. Peace to a lot of people at that time also meant health. Peace be to you. Well, it's not just an absence of war or absence of problems. It's the idea of peace, health, prosperity, peace with God. Okay? Now think about it as well. Does God need all these animals? No, but that's God's way to what? God wanted them to have that relationship with him. So when we start looking at this in all of that respect, man, it just really emphasizes to us that much more. Again, you have these flocks, chapter 3, verse 1, you have them from the flocks. Then you would have the offerings from the herd or from the goats. Here, the animal could be male or female. Okay? Male or female. But it had to be without blemish. And again, the same thing that we read about the burnt offering comes in here. What happens? The man lays his hands on the head of the offering, kills it at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. Aaron and his sons, the priest, sprinkle the blood all around the altar. He shall offer the sacrifice of peace offering, an offering made by fire. The fat that covers the entrails and the fat that is on the entrails, the two kidneys and the fat that is on them by the flanks. The fatty lobe attached to the liver he shall remove, and they burn that. They burn up all the fat. I was reading commentaries on this, and some people were saying, well, God may have been doing that so that his people wouldn't eat so much fat and get cholesterol and die. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to buy into that one or not. You know what I'm trying to say? Be careful what you read. You know what I'm trying to say? Just be careful what you say. Let's also be honest about this. Whenever you're eating a piece of steak and you got a piece of fat, what is the most flavorful part of it? Yeah. So you see, it's the idea here is that, interestingly enough, all this fat belonged to God. So it's not like you get this stuff to eat. They would actually go so far, God will actually command, you shall not eat fat and you shall not eat the blood. And so that's where a lot of this stuff starts coming in there. We think about, again, this peace offering. Think about what Jesus did. We have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ, Romans chapter 5, verse 1. So again, and may the peace of God that passes understanding, Philippians 4, verse 7. Jesus took care of that. We have peace with others, John 14 at verse 27. And Paul will say this in Ephesians 2, Jesus is our peace offering. Jesus is our peace offering. So again, when we're looking at this, Paul had in mind, no doubt he was there at the temple to watch a lot of these events whenever they were taking place. So Paul knew exactly what he was talking about, and whenever by inspiration he was writing, he would emphasize this. Ephesians 2, verse 13. Now in Christ Jesus, you who were once far off have been brought near by the blood of Christ. Under the Old Testament, they were not at peace with God. So for them to be at peace with God, an animal had to die. Now what? Paul says, no, you are in Christ. You have been far off, but now you're brought near. He himself is our peace, who made both one and has broken down the middle wall of separation, having abolished in his flesh the enmity, that is, the law of commandments contained in ordinances, Remember, the animal, all the flesh of this animal would be burned up, right? Well, we're going to get into a little bit more details of it in just a moment. That he might reconcile them both in one body through the cross, putting to death the enmity. He came and preached peace to those who were afar off. Christ is our peace. He preached peace to those who are far off and to those that are near. Through him, we have access by one Spirit to the Father. And you see this, huh? Again, more of an absence of conflict. Yes, it's a situation where you are now restored to the relationship with God that God wanted you to have from the very beginning. And also suggests the ideal of, that you are now can be in that relationship with him. They had to kill these animals to do it. And again, it would have been that much more important for them to do that in that respect. So, notice again the fat that covers the entrails, all the fat that is on the entrails, chapter 3, kidneys, the fat on them, the fatty lobe attached to the liver above the kidneys, he shall remove, burn it on the altar. And again, it's all a sweet. Notice how many times it says a sweet aroma to the Lord, a sweet aroma to the Lord. As these animals are being killed, he's thinking about those people that are offering these things. And that's what makes it sweet to the Lord. If his sacrifice is a peat offering made of the flock, whether male or female, he shall offer it without blemish. Lay his hand on it, kill it by the tabernacle of meeting. Aaron's son shall sprinkle it, and he shall offer from the sacrifice of the peace offering the whole fat tail, the fat that covers the entrails, and the fat that is on the entrails. Again, all this fat. And if his offering is a goat, okay? So again, God's part is all the fat. The priests do get part of this. They get part of the shoulder. Let me see if I can see this here. Yes, verse 17 is where it says, you shall eat neither fat nor blood. I think maybe in, look at Leviticus 7 again. In the law of the peace offerings, part of this was also involved the idea of peace offering for Thanksgiving. As I said earlier, the Thanksgiving, the votive offerings, the free will offerings. Notice the remainder of the flesh sacrifice on the third day must be burned with fire. All right. And so here you have not only the situation where the people are offering this, but these peace offerings would also be involved where you would actually eat part of this sacrifice. It would be kind of like a fellowship meal to us. Okay. You would kill an animal and you would offer the parts that God has demanded. Some of it you would give to the priest to feed their families, etc. But then you would also eat. And think about, because you're now at peace, you can eat, right? You can eat without any problems in that relationship with God. So that's what, again, he's trying to emphasize in all of this. Your sin has broken this relationship with you. And this is the reason why you have to do this way. All right, so you have the burnt offering, the meal offering, the peace offering. And again, we now go to chapter 4. Now we're starting with the cleansed offerings. I'm rocking and rolling tonight, aren't I? But again, I have to, because we've got a lot of places to cover. He says, speak to the children of Israel. If a person sins unintentionally, all right, the actual Hebrew could be translated through error. All righty, so you sin accidentally, you don't do it with intent. If you sin unintentionally against any of the commandments of the Lord in anything that ought not to be done and does any of them, if the anointed priest sins, bringing guilt on the people, then let him offer to the Lord for his sin, which he has sinned, a young bull without blemish as a sin offering. So now these priests are not only helping you to offer your sacrifices to God, but now what? They've got to take care of their own sins, right? I've often thought about the idea, and when we get to Leviticus 16:17, we're going to really key in on this idea, where on that Day of Atonement, he has to go into the most holy place and offer that blood. What if he errs unintentionally? What if he's in that most holy place and for whatever reason he loses sight of the directions? He's in a dark place. He knows where he came in at, so hopefully that will help him. But if you get turned around in there and it's dark, there's nothing in that most holy place except what? The Ark of the Covenant, but there's no light in there. Read the tabernacle situation, and this is so thick that it's darkness in this place. Suppose you get turned around and you don't offer the blood exactly the way you're supposed to. Why? You're in the presence of a holy God. So we will actually read, as you see it in the situation with Luke chapter 2 or Luke chapter 1, whenever John the Baptist's father, Zacharias, actually has to offer incense. This is something they would prepare their lives for so that they would get it right. So you sin unintentionally. You don't mean to. It's an error. You just do it. He said, if the anointed priest sins, then he has a way out. He shall bring the bull to the door of the tabernacle of meeting before the Lord, lay his hand on the bull's head. Now, you keep seeing they're laying on the hands of the head. Why? Why do they do that? We see another little hint of it in Leviticus wherever he's confessing the sins of the people. So laying the hands on the head of this sacrifice suggests the idea of the transference of the sin to this animal that's going to die to pay the price for your sin. But again, what does he say in Hebrews? The blood of bulls and goats, what?
Never take away sin.
Never take away sins. And that's why it took the death of Christ. So every time you see them laying their hands on the bull's head, they're in essence laying their sins on this person or on this sacrifice. He shall take some of the bull's blood, bring it to the tabernacle of meeting. He shall dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle some of the blood 7 times before the Lord. 7 times. In Leviticus 16, when he actually goes into the Day of Atonement, he sprinkles the blood 7 times toward the east. Toward the east. That's what I'm saying. If you got turned around in there, you know what I'm saying? Sprinkling blood toward the east. So that's the reason why they would always build this tabernacle facing the east. And there again, there's that most holy place, and he would be in there. I visualize it. I don't know how it was. It wasn't there, but I visualize him going into this most holy place, maybe standing up in this corner and shaking his finger back this way. Now, I don't know if that's the way he did it or not, but you kind of get the idea. So here they sprinkle the blood 7 times before the Lord in front of the veil of the sanctuary. So here you had the holy place, you had the most holy place. So here, as he offers this, well, that's the laver. Back up here, I'm sorry, I forgot something here. I apologize about that. Here's would be the bull altar and burnt offering right here, okay? And there would be the horn where they would sprinkle this on there. This would be the bronze laver where this priest would wash before they actually went into the most or the holy place. This would be the holy place, okay? And what's in here? You have the altar of incense right here. On the north side, if we figure out this is the north side, seeing as how this is east. Okay, so on the north side, you would have in here you would have the Ark of the Covenant, obviously. I cannot remember right off the top of my head. I thought I had it, but it just went out. Either the table of showbread is on the north, where I think that may be what's happening, and then you would have the golden censer, and you would have the golden censer would be what would have the light. There would be I'm going to take a break here in a few minutes, and I'll make sure about that. Okay, I want to make sure. I don't want to lead anybody wrong here in this respect. So we'll come back to this, and I'll explain it here after the break. So then he sprinkles some of the blood 7 times before the Lord. Why 7? Yeah, a lot of times it does suggest that idea. It does suggest the idea of the perfect number. 7 churches of Asia. You find 7 over and over and over again, and that's why a lot of people do suggest that idea. So he's sprinkling it before the altar, blood 7 times before the veil of the sanctuary. He shall also put some of the blood on the horns of the altar of sweet incense. Yes, this would be the altar of incense right here. So he puts some of this on the horns. Now, every one of these things would have, notice I kind of drew it here, but every one of these things would have horns on it, okay? I believe in this altar here, this is where they would tie the animal off as they're sacrificing it, making sure, okay? Then you would have horns on this, and you also had, no, not on the Ark of the Covenant, no. But there would also be horns on the table of showbread, and the other.
Does it tell us how many horns?
4 on the, it would be 4 because this would be on every corner. Okay, all righty. So they would sprinkle it on every corner of the horns of the altar, on the altar of sweet incense, which is in the tabernacle of meeting, and he shall pour the remaining blood of the bull at the base of the altar of the burnt offering, which is at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. So he uses some of the blood to put in here, and then he puts what? The rest of the blood down here. Okay? All righty?
The altar was a structure that they carried with them.
Do what?
Did they carry the altar?
Yeah.
With them every day, or is it something they rebuilt every time they set up the tent?
Just when they set up the tent. They didn't move the altar. Once it was set up, it would be set up until God says it's time to go again. And we'll see this especially in the book of Numbers. Go ahead.
Well, they're on this journey right now.
Right.
And they could stay in a place for a while before they move.
Right.
And so it would be set up for that.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they move, was the altar carried, or was it just rebuilt every time?
No, the altar would be carried. The most holy, the Ark of the Covenant would be carried. This altar of incense would be carried. This bronze laver would be carried. This altar would be carried. Whenever we get into the book of Numbers where they're actually talking about them moving from place to place, you'll see that they have it figured out. The children of Israel are camped all the way around this. This tabernacle is in the dead center of all the children of Israel. And so what would actually happen, you would have 2 of the tribes that would start off, and they would start leading the way. And one of them would be the tribe of Judah. Judah it seemed like it had the more than ample soldiers to lead off as they're going to where they're going. Okay? So these 2 would go off. In the meantime, when everybody's getting ready to move, the Levites would be tearing this down. They had carts because, they had heavy curtains, they had poles, they had the silver that these things stood on. Then it would be the priests themselves that would carry the Ark of the Covenant. There was a special way they had to do that. The high priest had to go in there and cover this up first, because nobody can see the Ark of the Covenant. It had to be covered. So sometimes whenever you see some of these pictures where the Ark of the Covenant is up on a mountain and it's just shining bright and everything, no, that's not the way it was. You couldn't see it, but you knew what it was. All right, they would cover all of these things up. You would put these curtains in some of these carts. They would come out in the middle of it. Then you would have these other, let's see, 12 tribes. So you would have these other 6 tribes here pulling up the rear. It was perfectly planned out. God had it planned out. And for 40 years wandering in the wilderness, moving this all this time, 40 long years, after a while, it got to be pretty systematic how it's going to be done. Okay? Very systematic. All righty? So, he would pour this blood at the altar of the burnt offering. He shall take from it all the fat as a sin offering, the fat that covers the entrails and the fat which is on the entrails, and the 2 kidneys and the fat that's on them. So again, they could not eat any of the fat. And the blood, a bull's hide and its flesh, head and legs, its entrails and offal, that would be its intestines and what was in the intestines, okay? The whole bull he shall carry outside the camp to a clean place where the ashes are poured out and burn it on wood with fire. Okay, notice here, this in the sin offering, it's not like the burnt offering where every bit of it is burnt on the altar. This sin offering would be taken outside of the camp and burned. Okay? Why? Because God was saying to them, get rid of the sin in the camp. So this is the way they would have to go about doing it. And then notice he said, now that's what would happen if the priest did it. Now verse 12 or 13. If the whole congregation of Israel sins unintentionally. Well, how are they going to do that? How does everybody sin unintentionally? Can you think of a situation where that might have happened? Anybody?
You just don't know the law.
Huh?
If you don't know the law, you can.
That's right. And that's right. And that's part of it too. Turn with me if you would. And like I said, we're going to look at this a little bit more detail here later. Turn to Numbers chapter 15. Numbers chapter 15. I'm not sure if this is the right passage. Give me a second.
Or you kill somebody accidentally.
Numbers 15, 24 through 26. Numbers 15 also gives us laws concerning these unintentional sins, okay? Verse 24 of Numbers 15, it will be, if this is unintentionally committed without the knowledge of the congregation, the whole congregation shall offer one young bull as a burnt offering, sweet offering to the Lord, with its grain offering and its drink offering according to the ordinance, and one kid of the goats. So the priest shall make atonement for the whole congregation of the children of Israel. It shall be forgiven them, for it was unintentional. And they shall bring their offering, an offering made by fire to the Lord, and their sin offering before the Lord for their unintended sin. It shall be forgiven the whole congregation of the children of Israel and the stranger who dwells among them, because all the people did it unintentionally. So you see kind of a repeat here in Numbers chapter 15 with regards to what we're reading about here in Leviticus chapter 4. Why does God have to repeat it twice? Anybody? Why do parents have to repeat something to their children, do it 3 or 4 times? No, no, they don't. And so it's extremely interesting how often God does repeat some of these same laws between Leviticus and Numbers and how they actually find their fulfillment in a lot of these situations. I think about, in a lot of this, you have the whole congregation sinning. Again, they lay the elders of the congregation. Now, earlier, it was the priest that would lay his hand. Now you have the elders of the congregation shall lay their hands on the altar or on the bull, head of the bull. Then the anointed priest shall bring some of the blood's bull to the tabernacle. The priest shall dip his finger in the blood, sprinkle it 7 times before the Lord in front of the veil. In front of the veil. Okay. Question is now, which veil? Is this the veil here? Or is this the veil here? I believe it would be this veil here, before the most holy place. Okay? Because again, you have this altar of incense that was sitting right here before this. And again, some of this blood would be sprinkled here. So picture this if you can for a few moments. As we try to figure out exactly how all this really played out, think about if he's sprinkling it before the veil, or if he sprinkles it on the altar of incense, the blood that's going to be all over these curtains. Think about that for a few moments. And, I obviously there was some way that they kept those clean. I'm not sure exactly how. I don't remember reading anywhere where it talks about cleaning the curtains. But if there was no cleansing of the curtains, just think about years and years and years of these curtains being used with blood sprinkled all over. They would become, well, again, it would become something that we couldn't even begin to imagine, wouldn't it?
Very heavy.
It would be very heavy. It would be stinking after a while because blood stinks. So you see the idea, there's still some things here that we're not all that we're sure about. We're still struggling to try to figure out. So here you have the offering for the priest if he sins, the offering of the congregation if they sin. Notice again, if you do it unintentionally. Now, what's interesting about this is God would have you can't offer a sin that you forgiveness, or you can't make a sin offering sacrifice for something you did intentionally. And the children of Israel on numerous occasions did that. Why were they allowed, or why were they forced to stay 40 years in the wilderness? Because they sinned intentionally. And that whole generation had to perish. And so the next generation hopefully would have learned. And they did. And they were the generation that took the land of Canaan. But again, when Joshua opens up, as long as Joshua's there, they're faithful to God. Judges opens up, they start worshiping all the idols of the land, right? So you see, it's something that that's what God gets very angry about, is the ideal of some of us sin unintentionally. Some of us sin in the moment. Some of us sin, because of the situation. We don't really we don't go into it, yeah, I'm going to sin. I'm going to tell a lie today. We don't usually go into it that way. But there are some folks that, you know what I'm talking about, they'd rather lie to you than look at you. You know what I'm saying? Some of you might be sitting there smiling, thinking of people that, the person jumps out in your mind. You know what I'm saying? So the thing is as you look at all of this, they not only would offer the male or the female, they would also offer 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour. God would get all the fat. Again, the entire offering where the blood was not taken into the tabernacle. This blood would be poured out at the base of the bronze altar and sometimes smeared on the horns of the incense altar. And again, the purpose of all this was what? Restoring the broken fellowship with God. All right? This is for public acts, and we're also going to see for private acts. When a ruler has sinned, verse 22, a leader, maybe one of the elders of the congregation of verse 15, then again, when he sinned unintentionally, if his sin comes to his knowledge, verse 23, he shall bring a kid of the goats, a male without blemish, lay his hand on the head of the goat, kill it at the place. And so you read all through there. If any one of the common people, verse 20, sins unintentionally by doing something against any of the commandments of the Lord and anything that ought not to be done and is guilty. Now, one of the things I want to impress upon you, and I hope you see this, is the idea of unintentional sin and how God was making provisions for that. But another emphasis that we have, and this goes back to what Brother Whitehead was saying a few months ago, and that's what? You need to know the law. You need to know ignorance of the law would what? No excuse. That's the reason why I believe I mentioned last week that young children would be required to memorize the book of Leviticus. Could you imagine memorizing this book? Okay. But you see, as a young child, you would be required to memorize this book to help you make sure you didn't do anything unintentionally. And again, the importance of that was impressed upon the parents, as the parents are trying to bring up their children and help their children to grow and be what they needed to be. All righty. Again, he shall lay his hand on the notice here. If you notice the priest, the whole congregation, you have a bull. When you have an elder, you have a bull offered. Okay, no, I'm sorry. If a ruler has sinned, he shall offer a kid of the goats. So if you have an elder that sins or a ruler of the congregation that sins, it's a kid of the goats, a male without blemish. Again, if any of the common people sin, again, it has to be a kid of the goats, a female without blemish. Now, notice that. Notice that. Up to this point in time, it's been a bull. Now, when you get to any of the common people, here you have really a situation where the first time you read of some of these before had included females, but here when a specific person did it, then you would actually offer a female. A female. Why would that be the case? Again, if you were a farmer, if you were a sheep herder, a female would herd a little bit more than just a bull, because why? Or more than a ram, because why? Yeah, babies. See? So that would help you to, again, impress upon your mind about what this sin did. And again, he shall bring a female without blemish, a lamb. All of these things going down through there, he gives different commands to different groups of people. Priests, whole congregation, elders, then individual people. All righty? And so as you're looking at all that, there we go. Let's take about a 5-minute, 10-minute break, okay? All righty. Yes?
I remember reading a passage about ignorance of the laws.
Mm-hmm.
Can't know where it is, but I've read it. But we say, like, if you have a new Christian and he doesn't know the scriptures yet,
Mm-hmm.
but he's trying,
Right.
he could be having sin without realizing it because he doesn't
Right.
know it's wrong. That would be a case of ignorance of the law.
Mm-hmm.
But that is automatically covered. Would it not be?
Under the Old Testament, obviously, they would have to offer these sacrifices when they found out. When a new babe in Christ would sin.
Yeah.
I think at that point in time, and he came to the realization that what he did was wrong, he would have to confess that sin. I think, and you see, what are we doing when we confess it? We're owning up to the fact that we've done it. Here, this was their way of owning up to it. And it cost them something. And sometimes when we confess, it costs. Right? We got away from confession in the church. And I think that part of the reason is because
Who you confess to depends upon
who you've sinned against.
Right.
Right. But again, that word confess actually comes from a Greek word, which is homologeo, which means you're saying the same thing as. You're saying the same thing that God already knows. God already knows your sin. So you're confessing it so you can own up to it, and hopefully that would be the point where you would stop doing it. Some folks, though they're not really trying that hard to quit it, I've actually had Christians come and tell me, well, I'll go ahead and commit the sin. God will forgive me anyway. And you see, that's bordering on intentional sin, and God looks at that a whole totally different way than he does unintentional sin.
You're putting yourself outside the church.
Yeah, you're putting yourself outside. You're putting yourself outside of, and if you continue to do it, what winds up happening, your heart will get hard to the point to where it doesn't bother you.
So if you have denominations for people, they're unintentionally sinning a lot of times because they never were taught.
Yeah.
They never get the word taught to them.
Right.
And they just never happen to encounter it.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to saying, I can't find this, but I like to do this because I like being part of this denomination.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there's a lot of people who just feel everything they're told has been accurate.
Right.
And that's not true.
Right.
So what would their situation be? Because they never really became.
Jesus will talk about the idea. Yeah. Jesus talked about the idea that the servant who knew his master's will and did not do it shall be beaten with many stripes. The one who did not know his master's will shall be beaten with fewer stripes. Is there a degree of punishment? I think so. But the problem that a lot of people have with that idea is the fact, well, if they go to hell, they go to hell. Is God going to, and this may be where the doctrine of purgatory and so forth begins to have its origins. Will their punishment not be how is God's punishment of them not going to be as severe as the one who knew but did not? And that's one of those situations I don't know how that works out. I do know that Jesus did talk about that. He did talk about the fact that he who knew his master's will and did not do it is going to be beaten with many stripes. He who did not know his master's will shall be beaten with few stripes.
We're saying this like people.
I had a big trash truck going up. And
That's like talking like somebody outside the church. That's talking about. As opposed to the new Christian who didn't know the will and violated it. Just not necessarily lost. Because he is a Christian.
Mhm.
That's what we're saying.
Right, right. And so,
So if you're somewhat ignorant and you're outside the church, you're lost because you're outside the church.
right,
And there might be different degrees of punishment.
right,
But if you're inside the church and you're ignorant, you're not lost. But once you discover your ignorance, you must address it.
you hopefully do.
Or else,
Absolutely.
Or else
Yeah.
with yourself, then you become deliberately putting yourself outside
Right.
the church.
Right. So there you go. And so that's it. That's it. So there's a lot of this stuff I don't know. And there's a lot of that I struggle with trying to figure out myself. And the bottom line is I looking at all of it was the ideal of, God's going to figure it out. He knows what he's doing.
Mhm.
And that's where I'm glad he's the judge.
Well, so many people, I think what they say about us is that we're just so over the top, careful
Mm-hmm.
in everything that we do. And they view God as being,
Harsh.
they said, God's so loving, he can't be that harsh
Mm-hmm.
to, like say I'm a Baptist and I'm a good Baptist and I do good works and I attend church regularly and I love the Lord and I study the Lord's word and I take care of widows and generous with my
Mm-hmm.
time and generous with my money and I'm doing everything in perfectly good conscience. They would say there's no way that person could be lost.
Yeah.
And we'd say, well, you read the scripture say if you don't do the will of the Lord, you're going to be
Right.
lost.
That's right.
And they just feel we're over the top with being careful so that we're not lost.
Right. And that's the onus, and that responsibility is ours. It is.
Yes.
But that's where we also are grateful for God's grace. Because
God chooses to not make some of those people lost.
Mhm.
It's up to him to do that if he wanted to. But according to his word,
right,
it doesn't sound like he's even intending to do that.
right. It just depends on what words you're reading. Sometimes you read where Jesus was very compassionate toward the woman taken in adultery in John chapter 8, where under the Old Testament law would have demanded that she be stoned to death. But I think, and that's where that's where I think God's grace really comes in, is the fact that, did the woman know she was wrong? Yeah. Did the woman engage in something she shouldn't have been doing? Yeah. Was it intentional? Probably. But he still was there offering her hope. And I think that we need to do, you know what I'm trying to say, there are some brethren in the church that feels like crucify, crucify. Whenever something bad is done wrong, and leave the brother or sister with the idea that there is no hope. So if they're going to feel that way about it, then I'm not going to be able to be saved anyway. So why bother? Jesus left this woman with hope. Go and sin no more. It's kind of like, yeah, you can do better than this, and you know it. Don't do it again. And she still had to deal with the stigma. She had to still deal with the stigma of what happened.
Yeah.
But in his words, go and sin no more, there's hope. And I think that's what we need to be doing. Not
Even when Solomon had
Yeah.
so many wives, David had so many
Yeah.
wives, concubines,
Yeah.
whatever that actually means.
Mm-hmm.
You would think that, okay, here's somebody being deliberately disobedient to my will, but yet God loved these people
Mm-hmm.
and did not take them down for being deliberate.
Right.
You see certain deliberate sins, and when you see a deliberate sin, God acts very deliberately in dealing with those people.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see much with him acting very deliberately against somebody who's less innocently committing sin.
Yeah.
But, you know, the unjust ruler who comes, you know,
Mm-hmm.
he's doing all these good things,
Right.
but yet Jesus won't accept him because he won't give him. So
Won't give up. Yeah, that's it. That was the key.
It's like it's got to be everything,
Mm-hmm.
or else
Nothing.
you're lost.
That's right. And that's a struggle with us, isn't it? We still struggle with that, right? Because we have our things that we like to do and so forth. And so we all struggle for that. So anyway,
I got a quick question for you.
I'll try to answer it.
I want to be able to copy your lesson tonight, especially on the board. How do I go about doing it? Because all these sacrifices, everything, they're just kind of
Yes, I know.
together.
What I will try to do, and I want to emphasize to everybody, a lot of this stuff is not me. It's just from my studies, but I will try to send everybody a copy of my notes. Okay.
Well, I would appreciate it. You don't know how much.
Because I think it's necessary, especially when we start getting down in the details of all this. And again, a lot of what I'm doing is reading, because you've got some people that have done a much better job. I'm typing in the notes that I get from this commentary. I'm typing in the notes that I get from another commentary. I got one commentary that I'm just using as the basis and then adding the notes to it. You know what I'm trying to say? So I want to emphasize to you that I'm trying to teach it as much as I know how from the commentaries I'm getting. Problem is you can't get too many commentaries, but what I will try to do is just send everybody the notes. And that way,
I appreciate that because, like I said, I'm catching some of it,
Mm-hmm.
but it's going.
I know.
And I understand some of it.
Yeah.
But there's so much. Well, at my age, I don't remember this time.
Yeah, I understand that.
I know it's there.
Mm-hmm.
What its purpose and everything like that. But what the makeup of it is, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I got it written down here. I'll look it up. You know, and I'll make
Yeah.
myself a drawing.
Yeah.
And everything later on. But still, you're going too fast for this old boy. And I don't want you to slow down.
Yeah, but the problem is with this class, I've got to cover 3 books in 15 weeks. And it's just about impossible to do it. But yeah, you're right. You're right. And
You can't afford to slow down.
that's right. I can't, because I got to try to get all of it in there. But at the same time, I don't want you to get lost. So that's why, and I'll tell you. Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
I'm reading and I'm looking at my notes and of course my notes are not the best, but I'm reading it.
Mm-hmm.
And that little sketch thing you got off the internet,
Mm-hmm.
that has really helped me.
Good. Charts, stuff like that does help. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's stuff on the internet where you can find where you actually see maps and how it's drawn out about the tabernacle and so forth. So let me encourage you to go ahead and use that as well. That's something I appreciate you bringing up. I wanted to make sure about that, the Mosaic Tabernacle. And there's some YouTube videos that shows it a little bit better, that even shows that tabernacle.
It's out there. I'll find it.
Yeah, it's there. It's there. There's videos of it. Okay, here we go. Okay, there is only three. There is only two things in there. Okay. All righty. All right. I was right. Okay.
Yeah, you're right. I was looking at
Right.
back to Exodus,
I wanted to make sure about that.
and I have a lovely picture in my Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Which way is north in that picture?
North is this way. So the table of showbread.
Yeah, so it's,
Yeah, the table of showbread.
all this is over here. Everything's just backwards. Northeast.
Yeah. See there, this would be the
You know,
only
Yeah.
ladder, the altar.
But it's showing it on that side.
Yeah. Like I said, it's got to be. I know that it faces the east. I know that for a fact.
If this is north, this is east.
Normally I wear a t-shirt.
But if you're
You're,
I didn't.
Never eat soggy waffles.
I did too. I got a t-shirt. I wore
But
t-shirt number one.
if you put north down here like you had it, then this is east.
Yeah, that's right.
But now
That's right.
but most people always think of north being up here.
Yes, I know, and that's where
Put north, and then you put
Right.
your
all this
altar, all
would
this
be
over
east.
here.
So all this stuff would be flipped.
Yeah.
Be south, and this would be west.
Yeah.
They sent me.
All right. Because looking at it from our viewpoint, is south this way, north is that way.
Yeah.
East is that way, west is that way.
Okay.
All right.
I'm thinking.
So thank you.
But
Like
And I
I said,
haven't found, like, I haven't found it because there's a lot of details in here.
Uh-huh.
So I haven't found where it says, like, actually, you know, this goes to the west, this goes to the.
It's actually back in Exodus. That part is back in
Yeah,
Exodus.
I'm in Exodus. It's
So
lost.
I can find a place to park. And walk on up there, and I'm gonna go early. And, I think it was- yeah, I like the idea of that scenery, but it's the same token. And it is.
We're figuring out the carving apple.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I know what you mean.
And
If I went down to the.
I think it's gonna be,
it's just not open yet.
yeah.
I'm gonna call, and find out when it does open up. Normally, when I voted to park, but I've never voted there yet. I've always try to go early. There's always a line there, but being as old as I am, I get to go in front of the line.
Yeah.
You know, it's nice to say that every once in a while, but back in those days, hey, you're not front of the line. So, I was real surprised, and
You know, when I voted this time.
Yeah.
And the manager of the department, I said, "Why you voted?" I said, "Yes, that's right."
you know, I'm gonna tell you something funny. It wasn't funny to him.
Did you take his class on Exodus?
I have an acquaintance, as an ex-Marine. And he is a gun home Marine, okay? He's a
I
Marine.
think we only got
Marine.
like halfway through it.
I would have loved to.
And you see him with a flag.
Anyway,
We carry it on staff, okay? Because she was staff, the American flag. And it's not a little bitty flag either, it's a big flag.
Yeah,
I think it's 3 by 5.
that's part of the problem. And out here I am trying to cover through.
Anyway, when we voted,
Pray for me. I'll try to find that. Okay, I'll try to find that.
He didn't like it because he had a dead little outline. They called the sheriff's department on it. He is, with his flag, carrying his flag.
Oh, you sound like Charles
On staff, yeah. And they called the police on it. One of the sheriff deputies come in and find out who it, come on, took him right to the front of the line. So he used that dead little. Oh, but he's a gun home Marine.
Yeah.
And you'll see him walking around sometime around that area.
They used to call us that, come home, so. You know, he's come from Vietnam.
Oh, yeah. Well, he was in Vietnam.
Mhm.
He got wounded, and he's still fighting to get his
Tommy,
Yeah, brother.
where is book, chapter, and verse where it talks about
Anyway,
God
medical
plus
being wounded, I
leaders?
can't think of the name of it.
Do what now?
Where is
And,
book, chapter, and verse where it talks about the God puts leaders over the lands?
Got his back pay and all the stuff he put in.
Leaders over the land.
For Vietnam.
You would have the judges, which would be different leaders over the land. If you're talking about the government, it would be Romans 13, where he talks about him putting certain leaders in there. Romans 13, 1 Peter chapter 2 would be another passage that would talk about it. The tabernacle facing the east is found in Numbers chapter 3. Numbers chapter 3. We haven't got there yet. Those who were to camp before the tabernacle on the east, before the tent of meeting toward the sunrise. See, so Numbers chapter 3, verse 38. So he talks about that. So the leaders of the land, again, goes back to Romans chapter 13, if that's what you're talking about, and 1 Peter chapter 2. Okay? All right. All right, we're picking back up again. Thank you for being with us and hanging in there with us. Chapter 5, the trespass offering. You have the sin offering, and now you have the trespass offering. If a person sins in hearing the utterance of an oath, and is a witness, whether he's seen or known of the matter, and if he does not tell it, he bears guilt. So here's a situation where he hears utterance of an oath, and if a person touches any unclean thing, the carcass of an unclean beast, what would be an unclean beast? Pigs, all right? Any animal that's scavenger, dogs, okay? The carcass of an unclean livestock, the carcass of unclean creeping things, and he's unaware of it, he shall be unclean and guilty. Now, notice again, as you're looking at this, how detailed the emphasis is about how a person can become unclean so quickly. That's the reason why Jesus will talk about in the New Testament, he would say and emphasize the idea that you make white as sepulchres. What was the reason for that? Because the Jews were afraid that if they walked over a grave, they would be unclean. So that's the reason why they would make these white as sepulchres. They would make sure that everybody knew this is a tomb. Don't walk over it, because that would make you unclean. Okay? So that's the reason why he's really emphasizing this. All righty? So if he touches any human uncleanness, whether by a man which may be defiled, and he's unaware of it, when he realizes it, he shall be guilty. Notice, when does this person become guilty? When he realizes he's been in touch with somebody that's unclean, right? If a person swears, speaking thoughtlessly with his lips to do evil or to do good. Okay, now remember what Jesus would say in the New Testament. Swear not at all, neither by heaven, nor by the earth, nor by his throne. You know, we should live our lives without having to swear to anything. So he says, whether it's a man that may pronounce by an oath and he's unaware of it, when he realizes that, he shall be guilty in any of these matters. I think chapter 5 helps us to understand a little bit more of unintentional sin. Okay? So you cross the part where there was a dead carcass and you didn't know it. Okay? You may have touched human uncleanness. If you swear and promises to do something, and then, you realize that what not should have been done, he shall confess that he has sinned. Now notice verse 5, chapter 5, verse 5. He shall confess that he has sinned. In the New Testament, that word confess comes from a Greek word which means to say the same thing as. In other words, confession is saying the same thing that God already knows you've done. Why does he have to confess that sin? Because when you confess it, you own it. And when you confess it and own it, then you want to do something about it. A lot of people deny that they ever sinned. Well, I didn't do nothing wrong. And again, it goes by their moral code that says what? Everybody else is wrong. I'm right all the time, right? And the only person that ever lived like that was Jesus. So the bottom line is, here you have this situation. He shall confess that he has sinned in that thing. And so then he shall bring a trespass offering. All right. So both of these, the trespass and the sin offering earlier mentioned, is from unintentional transgressions. It's only here we have a little bit better understanding of what would be the sin offering and the trespass offering. Both procured atonement. And again, here, this differed from the sin offering in that the trespass offering applied only to an individual. The animal was slaughtered and eaten by the priest. And then he says what? It can only consist of a ram, and it must be a misappropriation of what belonged either to the Lord or to a fellow Israelite. Let's just read the context. He shall bring his trespass offering to the Lord for a sin which he's committed, a female from the flock, a lamb or a kid or the goats as a sin offering. So here you have a trespass offering. And now he compares it to a what? Sin offering. The priest shall make atonement for him concerning his sin. If he's not able to bring a lamb, then he shall bring 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons. One is a sin offering, the other is a burnt offering. He shall bring them to the priest, who shall offer that which is for the sin offering first, bring off its head, but shall not divide it completely. Sprinkle some of the blood of the sin offering on the side of the altar, and the rest of the blood shall be drained out at the base of the altar. It is a sin offering. He shall offer the second as a burnt offering according to the prescribed manner. But if he's not able to bring 2 turtle doves, then he brings 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour as a sin offering. So here again, you have the situation where if he can, he has to offer an animal, either a turtle dove or a lamb. And here next, you can't do that. Then you have to put what? A fine flour. No oil on it, nor frankincense. When you go back earlier, the grain offering would demand the oil. That would demand the frankincense. But this is a trespass offering. And he shall bring it to the priest. The priest shall take a handful of it as a memorial portion, burn it on the altar, according to the fire. It's a sin offering. And again, notice, trespass offering, sin offering has a lot of similarities between them. Okay? And he shall make atonement for him for his sin that he's committed. It shall be forgiven him. The rest shall be a priest as a grain offering. Let me emphasize again, as you're reading through this, you really find no provision in the Old Testament for intentional sins. These are sins that you accidentally commit. There's no real provisions for an intentional sin that you knew to be a sin. So what began to happen with the children of Israel, because there was no provision for that, what then began to happen is after a period of time, the more people sinned intentionally, the more their sin built up, and God said, enough's enough. I can't deal with this anymore. And he has to punish them. What does that say to us? What does that say to, the attitude, well, I'll go ahead and sin anyway? God still does not like intentional sins. Now, you go back and remember what happened with Judas. He warned Judas about what was going to happen. Judas had his chance, but Judas loved the money more than he loved the Lord. He warned Peter. Now, Peter, I try to cut Peter a little bit more slack because why? It was in the heat of a moment. In the first part of it, he chopped off somebody's ear. But then when things are looking real bad and things are going south real quick, then he what? Like all the other disciples, he forsook him and fled. I dare say that most Christians don't do intentional sins. I think most of what we do is unintentional. We get backed into a corner and we do something that we know we shouldn't have done, or we lie, or we do something along that line. And that's where we have to have, we have to be a lot more diligent that we don't give in to sin in that respect.
The distinction between trespass and sin.
What?
The distinction between trespass and sin.
The trespass.
In the New Testament,
Yeah.
it forgives the trespass.
Yeah. It's a trespass again. Sin is harmatia, which just is sin. It just denotes sin any kind, which could be intentional, unintentional. It could be because the context would make the difference. Obviously,
Like
yeah.
violation of law.
Yeah.
There has to
Right.
be a law that you violate
Right.
sin.
Mm-hmm.
Is trespass something different?
Trespass would be going beyond the law. Here's what the law said. Here's the limit of the law, and now what? You're going to go past it. right? I think about it from the viewpoint of, again, being reared on a farm. We had fences around our farm, and we put up no trespassing signs. And all, every few feet, we put up no trespassing signs. Well, what do they do if they crossed the fence? They went over the line. They crossed over that. They knew what they were doing in that respect, in one sense. Sometimes you don't know if you see a fence. Now, I was taught you don't climb a fence unless you know whose fence it is. Okay? But a lot of folks today cut a fence or something like that just to go through it. They don't care. So you see the point that I'm trying to make in all of this is that there's a limit how far you can go. God said this far and no farther, and you still go on that way. And then there's, again, where you're maybe, again, trespass would be going beyond that. Sin itself would be maybe unintentional or intentional sin. Okay? Yes, sir?
I'm trying to understand this. And also, I'm thinking about the day too, when you say we repent to the Lord, we get out of our Lord, together.
Right. Right.
We do say that we're not doing what they did then when they had the tabernacle and the priest. And we are doing something similar.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not doing often, but we are dependent on this. Asking God.
That's right. And so here's, again, you have some unintentional sins, some unintentional trespasses. When you read through all the book of Leviticus, going on into the book of Numbers, you go on back to Exodus, there's a lot, 660 something laws to keep. How many of them is going to keep all those laws in your mind all the time? Think about even today. My sons, I've had 3 sons that have been police officers, one still is. I hate to tell you everybody this, you may know this already, but police officers can pull you over for just about anything, period, end of discussion. Because a lot of times we are trespassing the law because of things that we don't even know about. We don't even know that there's a law against that. Now, that's the reason why I would emphasize the idea that the children of Israel would demand that the young people memorize the book of Leviticus so they would know what the laws were. But if you were to go today and try to memorize the law books of the state of Georgia, yeah, 48 volumes, and that's just the beginning. And then the case law that changes all of those other laws that you've just memorized, you can't do it. That's why you pay an attorney to try to hopefully get you out of whatever the situation is. Thank God that Jesus is our advocate, 1 John 2, verse 1. That's all I can say about that. All righty. So this guy has committed this trespass offering. You have the different levels as to what you could do. If you can't bring the turtle doves or the lamb, you then bring the cake, the handful of that flour. You go on in verse 14 of chapter 5. Then the Lord spoke to Moses. Now, again, notice the emphasize. Then the Lord spoke to Moses. We started the book off. The Lord called to Moses. All righty. Chapter 4, verse 1, the Lord spoke to Moses. Chapter 5, verse 14, the Lord spoke to Moses. Chapter 6, verse 1, the Lord spoke to Moses. Verse 8, the Lord spoke to Moses. You get a pattern here? God is saying this to Moses, so Moses wants them to, and he's writing it down. So if a person commits a trespass and sins unintentionally in regard to the holy things of the Lord, what does that mean, the holy things of the Lord? Suppose they're traveling with all this tabernacle, and the Levites were in charge of dismantling and setting up the tabernacle every place they stopped. We're going to see that in the book of Numbers. So they will go to a certain distance. They would set up the tabernacle, depending on how long they'd be there. Then they would break it back down again, start again on another day's, on another 2 or 3 days journey. I've often wondered, and I'm going to try to do even more study on this when we get into the book of Numbers, how were they offering the daily sacrifices every day whenever they were traveling?
Find that much wood.
Well, find that much wood, part of the problem, but also the other part of the problem is it would seem like when they're traveling, then that would be superseded. They would have to set the whole tabernacle back up to offer the sacrifice. And literally, you could get it torn down and put back up fairly quickly the way it was built. But on the other hand, to have those sacrifices day in and day out, that would be another thing, and I haven't really figured out yet. And I want to continue to do some study on that. If any of you go and chase that rabbit a little bit and find out, I'd love to hear your encouragement there. Okay. I've been challenging everybody now. Okay. Everybody. All righty. So if you're online, brother, if you want to chase that, go find out that for me. All right. I appreciate that. All right. All right. Make restitution. All right. If you commit, you sin unintentionally in regard to the holy things of the Lord. You touch something you're not supposed to. When we get into here, the Levites are supposed to take all this down and put it all back up. But was the person that offered the sacrifice really touching the altar? No, it was the priest that was supposed to all touch the altar. Suppose this guy touched the altar and he wasn't supposed to. You see, that's a holy thing to the Lord. That's where these animals would be killed. So he would have to make a restitution for that as well. And he shall add 1/5 to it and give it to the priest. So the priest shall make atonement for him with the ram of the trespass offering, and it shall be forgiven him. If a person sins and commits any of these things that are forbidden to be done, though he does not know it, yet he is guilty, he shall bear his iniquity. Again, in all of this, there is no provision for intentional sin. None. So he shall bring a ram without blemish to the flock, so the priest shall make atonement for him regarding his ignorance, which he erred and did not know it. It is a trespass offering. He certainly trespassed against the Lord. Chapter 6, verse 2. If a person sins and commits a trespass by lying to his neighbor. Now we're getting to kind of what? Now we're going to get into some of the intentional sins. We've got to be, So he says, about what was delivered to him for safekeeping, or about a pledge, or about a robbery, or if he is extorted from his neighbor. Yeah, Carrie, you loaned me your $500,000, and you told me to keep it, but guess what? Whenever I got it in my safe, somebody came and stole my safe. And it's kind of like, oh, really? All righty. If he found what was lost and lies concerning it and swears falsely in any of these things that a man may do, it shall be because he sinned and is guilty. He shall restore what he has stolen, or what he has extorted, or what was delivered to him for safekeeping, and all about that he has sworn falsely, he shall restore its value and add 20% more to it. 1/5. And give it to whomever it belongs on the day of his trespass offering. So that $500,000 you kept and I lied about, now I have to pay you the $500,000 back plus another $100,000 because I lied to you about it. Whoa, okay then. Now, you see, that would kind of make you think a little bit, wouldn't it? See? He's sworn falsely, he shall restore the true value. He shall bring his trespass offering, and then on top of that, he would bring a ram without blemish from the flock with your valuation, with your appraisal, and the priest shall make atonement for him before the Lord. He shall be forgiven for all the things that have done in which he trespasses. Now, I've exaggerated, obviously, the $500,000, you know what I'm saying in that respect, but suppose, and we do see this situation play out where you're keeping one of your neighbor's animals for a while and something happens to the animal. What are you supposed to do? You're supposed to restore it and then give another 1/5 to it. See? So there's supposed to be that law of restitution. So we come back, as I said earlier, chapter 1 talks about the law of the burnt offering. This is another reason why we kind of get lost sometimes when we go through Leviticus, because we read about the burnt offering and the actual situation there. But then you have this. You have some addendums to the law. So here's what we have in chapter 6, verse 8. This is the law of the burnt offering. It shall be on the hearth upon the altar all night until morning, and the fire of the altar shall be kept burning on it. So here's the thing. When you make that burnt offering, you got to stay up all night and keep that thing burning all night long. All night long. So now we've got guys that's having to what? Pull night duty, right? The priest shall put on his linen garments, his linen trousers, which is he shall put on his body. And by the way, when you go back to Exodus, you again see where these things were made. And there were certain kinds of things they were supposed to do. He shall take up the ashes of the burnt offering, which the fire consumed on the altar, and shall put them beside the altar. Take off his garments, put on other garments, carry the ashes outside the camp to a clean place. And the fire on the altar shall be kept burning on it. It shall not be put. So this thing was burning all the time, constantly, day in, day out. And as I said earlier, that's part of what I was saying earlier, the idea that they obviously had to keep this thing going. So if they're traveling, what do? If you're traveling and you spend a little bit of time and you don't get it, somehow or another, you've got to keep that fire going. It's got to be the same fire that started it off. Okay, does everybody understand what I'm trying to say? You've got to keep a log burning or something as you're traveling, because it's still that same fire, huh?
It's raining, that could be a challenge.
That could be a challenge. That's exactly right. So there's some of this that, again, I'm struggling in my own mind to figure out exactly how it all works out. I'm sure the children of Israel had it all figured out because they would do it. So again, this is for it shall be, that fire shall never go out. This is the law of the grain offering. Remember earlier, he shall take his handful. Again, the sons of Aaron shall offer it and take from it his handful of the fine flour and the frankincense, and shall burn on the altar of a sweet aroma as a memorial to the Lord. And the remainder of it, Aaron and his son shall eat. So now we're beginning to see what parts of these offerings that we talked about, what part of these offerings then go to Aaron and his sons to support their family. With unleavened bread, it shall be eaten in a holy place. In the court of the tabernacle of meeting, they shall eat it. So they're eating it. This is the holy place. This is the bronze altar, laver. So they would be eating this in the holy place, in the tabernacle, or in the court of the tabernacle. Actually, this would be the tabernacle itself, and then they actually had another bigger place where everybody could come to, and this would be the court of the tabernacle. Most of the time, we just emphasize on the holy place and you know how to spell tabernacle, T-A-C-L-E. All right, so they would eat it within the confines of that court of the tabernacle. Okay? It shall not be baked with leaven. I have given it as a portion by my offerings made by fire. It's most holy. All the males among the children of Israel Aaron shall eat it. It shall be a statute forever. Everyone who touches them must be holy. So this is the offering of Aaron and his son, beginning on the day when he's anointed 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour. So now, the priest is getting all the children of Israel's offerings. They take a part of that. Some of that they eat for themselves, but they also take part of that and now offer their part. Their offering, 1/10 of an ephah, half of it in the morning, half of it at night, in a pan of oil. The priest from among his sons who's anointed, it's a statute forever, it shall be wholly burned. Every grain offering for the priest will be wholly burned. It shall not be eaten. So the priest would have to give their part to God on top of everything else. All right? And then the law of the sin offering. Again, this is the law of the sin offering. Where the sin offering is killed, it shall be killed before the Lord. The priest offers it for sin, shall eat it. In a holy place, it shall be eaten in the court of the tabernacle. Everyone who touches his flesh must be holy. All righty. And he goes on, the earthen vessels in which it is boiled shall be broken. If it's boiled in a bronze pot, it should be scoured and rinsed in water. All the males among the priests may eat it. It is most holy. The law of the trespass offering. So now what we find in chapter 6 and 7. Here is Aaron's part. Here is Aaron and the chief priest part. All right? All the trespass offering, and again, every male among the priests may eat it. It shall be eaten in a holy place, most holy. The trespass offerings, I want you to think about this. A lot of times, something else came to my mind. As you think about the number of animals that would be killed here, Aaron couldn't do it all by himself. So you would have these priests, all of them, working every day, full time, killing these animals and everything else. So these priests would have to, they'd have to take a break. And what? They'd have to eat, well, this is my lunch hour. I'm going to go eat this offering that this person made at this time so I can keep my strength up to keep on dealing with all these animals and everything else. So just to try to picture that in your mind. So a lot of times when we see the pictures, we only think about Aaron. Aaron is the one that's in the most holy place, in the holy place. But then you have probably, well, I have no way of knowing how many priests are out here helping take care of all this other stuff at the same time. Making sure the fire is burning, making sure the animals are killed, making sure they're killed right. All this stuff going on at the same time.
Everybody in the tribe of Levi wasn't necessarily priests, were they?
No, not everybody were priests, but specifically the priests would be the descendants of Aaron. Okay? And then that's where so you would have Phineas and Eleazar here. As it starts off, Moses starts it, but again, Aaron is the chief priest. You would have Phineas and Eleazar, and he had two other sons. I can't remember their names right off the top. I remember those two were killed. So, or Nadab and Abihu, Leviticus chapter 10, they're killed. So he had sons, a lot of sons. So then they would be getting their sons ready, and their sons ready, and their sons ready.
That was the priest, and the rest of the Levites still didn't own the land or possess anything.
No.
But yet they had duties to do.
Yeah.
Perform.
The children of Israel, or the Levites, would be the ones to carry the tabernacle everywhere they went on the wilderness journey. But the priests would be the ones that break it down, set it up, making sure it was done the way that God wanted it to be done. Because again, only the high priest could be allowed into these particular areas, or priest period. And they had to be descendants of Aaron. All righty? So every one of these things, every male among the priests may eat it. It shall be eaten in a holy place. The trespass offerings like the sin offering. The priest that offers anyone's burnt offering, that priest shall have for himself the skin of the burnt offering. So this helps us to understand chapter 1, and it may help us to understand, did the priest do the skinning or did the offerer do the skinning? It kind of seems like it could be either one. We do know that the priest would gain the skin. Why would that be so important? That's what they made their clothes out of. This is where they got their clothing. All righty. The law of the peace offerings, again, just a couple of, we've seen a lot of this already. If he offers it for a Thanksgiving, unleavened cakes with oil, one cake from each offering is a heave offering to the Lord. It shall belong to the priest who sprinkles the blood of the peace offering. The flesh of the sacrifice of his peace offering for Thanksgiving shall be eaten the same day it is offered. She would have to eat that meat that day. Okay? He shall not leave any of it till the morning. If the sacrifice of it is a vow or a voluntary offering, it shall be eaten the same day. But on the next day, the remainder of it also may be eaten. I don't know how they kept up with all that. I'm just being honest. I'm just trying to help you. I don't understand how they kept up with all that. How you kept part of the meat some day. And again, on the third day, all the flesh had to be burned. Anything left over from those 2 days, all of it had to be burned. All righty. The flesh that touches any unclean thing shall not be eaten. It shall be burned with fire. All who are clean may eat of it. As for the clean flesh, the clean, those that are serving. If the person who eats the flesh of the sacrifice of the peace offering that belongs to the Lord while he's unclean, that person shall be cut off from his people. So then we're going to see a little bit later on in the book of Leviticus what makes a person unclean. Okay? And that's going to be another thing that's going to have to factor in here. The person who touches any unclean, any human uncleanness, an unclean animal, or any abominable unclean thing, and eats the flesh of the sacrifice, that person shall be cut off from his people. So later on, we're going to get into some very specific laws about sex, and we will see that some people would be unclean till the morning. Okay? So those kind of things would come into play as well as you look at all of that. So as I see it, as I visualize it, Aaron and his sons would be the ones serving, and for whatever reason, somebody may be unclean, they would have to work in shifts. Somebody would have to take care of that job that he couldn't do it that day because he was still unclean. All right? And this is, again, how I visualize it. This is, again, how I see it. Somebody help me understand that a little bit more. Like I said, I would like to have been back there to see that and teleport to the 2020 and tell exactly what it looked like. But this is the way I envision it. And again, in your studies, you might be able to come up with something different. And if you do, please share it with us, because I'm more than ample or more than happy to hear that.
He didn't call in late for work. He called in clean.
Yeah, he wouldn't call in late for work. He'd call in unclean for work. Okay, that's what the brother said, and I kind of, I can't do that today. I'm unclean. Okay, all righty then. All right. The fat and blood, again, he emphasized this earlier, that the children of Israel could never eat the blood. You shall eat neither fat nor blood, chapter 3, verse 17. Again, chapter 7, verse 22 through 27. He says, you shall not eat any fat of ox, sheep, or goat, the fat of the animal that dies naturally, the fat of that which is torn by the beast. Whoever eats the fat of the animal of which men offer, made by fire to the Lord, that person who eats it shall be cut off from his people. You shall not eat blood in any of your dwellings, whether bird or beast. Whoever eats any blood, that person will be cut off from his people.
So they're no longer on the tribe.
Yeah. So that's, God's serious about that.
So one of the wilderness on your own.
Yeah, so you want to make sure you didn't do that, right? Especially, I needed that family union. I needed that in that respect. I asked a preacher one time in a Bible class that I was in I think it was Magnolia Bible College. I said, well, what about eating medium rare steaks? Would that be a sin or not?
Why would you want to do that?
Why would I want to do that? I like medium rare steaks, okay? I have tried rare, but that's a little bit too far gone for me. You know what I'm saying?
I
But
had an acquaintance years ago. You take the steak out, throw it in the pan, turn it over, let it cook a couple seconds, and then you start eating.
yeah, and I couldn't do that. And the thing that sometimes happens is whenever you're eating medium rare steak, you kind of get the juices out, and they look a little bit red. Okay. And I asked the brother about that, and he said, well, I wouldn't do it, but remember, this is under the Old Testament. And he says, not eating the blood, there's that idea there. The thing that I want to key in on and stress to you is the fact that sometimes that meat, it's not blood per se. They bled the animal when they bleed it right. They bled the animal right. It's just more of, what would you call it? It's not hemoglobin, but it might be just the serum from the animal, from the muscle, as opposed to that actually being blood. So, but then he just smiled at me. He said, if in doubt, don't. That's so, you know, everybody's going to have to come to your own conclusion on that one. All righty. But the bottom line is they were not allowed in that situation. No blood if that person will be cut off from his people. And then he said, he who offers the sacrifice of his peace offerings to the Lord shall bring his offering to the Lord from the sacrifice. His own hand shall bring the offering. The fat with the breast he shall bring. The breast shall be waved as a wave offering before the Lord. I have tried to do some study on this idea of what a wave offering was. And again, I get a lot of different ideas from a lot of different things. It seems like that as they are offering it, somehow or another, it was waved somehow like that. But exactly how and what exactly was meant by that, again, I've read a lot of other things, and hopefully I will be able to do some more studying on it and give you some other ideas before this is over with. So he shall make this wave offering. There was also that idea of a heave offering. A heave offering. And again, I've tried to do some studying on that and seeing exactly where that is. Does anybody have any ideas yourself? Any thoughts?
Very heavy bull.
A very heavy bull? Okay.
I don't know how right this is, but my commentary in my Bible.
All right.
Bible,
All right.
it says, the officiating priest received an individual portion, the thigh or heave offering. So it's just the thigh, I guess.
Right. And it seems like as you're reading through this a little bit, it suggests the idea of that would be the priest portion. The wave offering might be the priest portion. Then the heave offering would be, you have to do it in the idea, you have to be in ritual purity. You give this part as well to the Jewish priest as a gift. So the wave offering as well as the heave offering would be something that you would give for the priest. All righty? And that's what they would be doing. And again, remember realizing this is in the passage and that talks about the portion for Aaron and his sons. So he talks about the wave offering, and the priest shall burn the fat on the altar, the right thigh you shall give to the priest as a heave offering. So these may be the two offerings that would be specifically to the priests for their offering these animals. All righty? So you have the part of the peace offering, so you could have the breast of the wave offering and the thigh of the heave offering. I've taken from the children of Israel that I have given them to Aaron the priest. This is the consecrated portion for Aaron and his sons from the offerings made by fire to the Lord. And so this shall be a statute forever throughout all their generations. The law of the burnt offering, the law of the grain offering, the sin offering, the trespass offering, which the Lord commanded Moses on Mount Sinai on the day that he commanded that. So here you have all the offerings. Everybody thoroughly confused. Everybody's nodding. I will share with you what I shared a few moments ago. I will send you my notes that are, a lot of them are simply commentaries from various passages, and I will send those to you so you will have what I have, all right? So that you will know just as much as I do, all right? And I try to do it a little bit more and add a little bit more to it as I go along and continue to work through it. So please bear with me, and I'm trying to do what I can to help you learn. And if you come across something in your study, in your commentary or something like that, that can help us to understand these things a little bit more, please ask you to help us to do just that. All
Hey,
right.
Tommy,
Yes, go ahead.
I'll do a study on the wave offering and the heave offering.
All right. Thank you, brother. I appreciate that.
You're quite welcome.
And by doing that will help us all out. And that's, again, what we're doing in all of this. We're here to learn together. We're here to learn from one another. And I have to do that as well.
Okay.
Well, we have these notes back.
Yeah.
We can teach these classes for the past.
That's right. That's right. So here's some final principles that I want you to learn from chapters 1 through 7. All righty. Number one, here's some principles that you really need to grasp. Number one, A worshiper could never come to God empty-handed. Whoever came to God had to have something in his hand. A worshiper could never come into the presence of God empty-handed. Number two. Does everybody have number one? All right, I'll talk slowly, so this to me is important. A Hebrew word translated offering, korban, means a thing brought near. So again, it suggests the idea of how a person can come into the presence of God. You will remember that in the New Testament, there would be a man who was supposed to take care of his father and mother. But he would go to his father and mother and say, the gift that I was supposed to give you to take care of you, it is now korban. Korban just means offering. The gift that I would give to you to take care of you in your old age, it is now a gift to God. And Jesus condemned that person that did that, or the people that did that, because he said, you have violated the law of God and not taking care of your aged parents by supposedly offering that to God. So that's where we get that word korban. It's offering. All right, number one, a worshiper can never come into the presence of God empty-handed. Number two, the Hebrew word korban means a thing brought near. So number three, the offering was a domesticated animal. The offering was a domesticated animal. They were more costly and more valuable. They come from your flock. They're yours, that God has blessed you with. So you're giving back the most costly and valuable thing that you have to God. Every animal had to be without blemish, without spot. It had to be perfect in every way. And you know what I mean by perfect. Obviously, every animal and everything's got problems because they're not all perfect, right? But it had to be just the best of the best that you had. And again, arguments could be made, rightly so, about the idea of, do we give God our very best? All right?
Quick question.
Yes.
Is there somewhere in the Old Testament, I thought there was, about with the animal that they would sacrifice, they were to care for it like it was a family member very close to that animal, like to really care for it, like as of their own? Thought I heard something like that.
I can't think of anything in the Old Testament where that idea would be brought out. I will do some studying on it. I do remember that there was a parable. I think it was the parable that was told to David about a man who had a lamb. And he said he took care of this lamb as if it was a child. That was whenever David had committed the sin with Bathsheba. Remember? And so Nathan would come and challenge him, and he says, you have taken Uriah's wife, Bathsheba, which was as the figure goes, a precious lamb to him, and you've had adultery with her, and then you had him killed. So he uses that figure. Now, that'd be the only thing I could think of right off the top of my head in maybe 2 Samuel chapter 13, where he actually tells him that. That's the only place that I can think of that suggests that idea.
All right, I thought I heard something.
Okay. I have not seen or read anything like that, but like I said, that's the first thing that popped to my mind. I'll do some more research on it as well.
All right.
Number 4. Did I give you number 4? No. Number 4. The gift which was offered depended upon the financial resources of the worshiper. The gift that was offered depended upon the financial resources of the worshiper. Even the very poor could give a bird or a grain in the sin offering, right? So you would not be expected to give something you didn't have, but you would be expected to give what you did have to the best of your ability. Number 5, the worshiper was an active participant in the ritual. The worshiper was an active participant in the ritual. He would lay his hands on the head of the sacrificial victim. And the animal, a lot of times, would be killed by the worshiper. So that would emphasize to him how important his relationship with God is more than anything else. Now, in the book of Malachi, Malachi will condemn the Jews because of the fact that they were offering God the leftovers. They were offering God these animals that were sick and lame and everything like that. And God will say to them, offer that to the governor and see if he'll accept it. He said, if the governor will not accept it, why are you offering this junk to me? And the point is they had to offer the best they could. Number 6. Number 6, the priest had the responsibility to apply the blood. The priest had the responsibility to apply the blood. The priest had the responsibility to apply the blood. Number 7. Ready? I'm not trying to go too fast, so I'm trying to give everybody a chance. Number 7. Either all or selected parts of the animal victim were placed on the altar and burned by the priest. Either all or selected parts of the animal. So the burnt offering, the whole animal would be offered, right? In some of the other offerings, then the priest would get the thigh or the right thigh. So again, it would be all burned by the priest. Not all the animal necessarily, but parts of the animal. And then last but not least, you're saying, good. Depending on, number 8. Depending on the sacrifice, those portions of the animal not burned were either given to the priest, given to the worshiper, or taken outside the camp and burned. Depending on the sacrifice, the portions of the animal not burned were either given to the priest. The portions of the animal not burned were either given to the priest, given to the worshiper, or taken outside the camp and burned. And then another thing that hopefully you've seen tonight is the idea of these sins could not be deliberate sins. They could not be intentional sins. This was just for unintentional sins. All righty? Sinned unwittingly and or ignorance, inadvertently, high-handed sin would be cut off. High-handed sin would be cut off. All righty? All right. We have, it's 8:38. Let's stop there. We'll pick up with chapter 8, and I'll try to go as far as I can. Again, some of you that's helping us out writing that stuff, let us know what your studies are. We will try to get through to, I'm going to try my best next week to get from chapter 8 to at least chapter 8 to 18. So that's 10 chapters, okay? So stick me to that, because chapter 18 is going to start dealing with the laws of morality that we'll have to look at. All righty? So I think that might be the best thing to do. What's going to happen in chapter 8 is that Aaron and his sons are consecrated. The priestly ministry begins. He starts talking about what kind of food you can eat, what kind of food you can't eat, all that good stuff. All righty? So thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you for being patient with me and helping me out. Sometimes I get kind of busy too, and I get behind in studying and getting ready where I need to be. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. But I will send you all the notes that I've got, and we'll go from there.
Okay,
Welcome.
thank you.
No, I appreciate all of you guys. Appreciate all of you guys so much. This is a study that I've never done before, so it's something that we got to cover a lot of ground a lot quick, and so I have to hit it a lot quicker than other things. So thank you for being patient with me. All righty.
One thing, I didn't do the first quiz yet. Can I hand that in tomorrow?
Yeah, it'll be fine.
Okay,
That'll be
great.
fine.
Thank you.
You will find that I'm a benevolent dictator. Okay. But there will come a
That was
time
good.
whenever I may have to be.
That was really good.
All righty.
All right.
No, I appreciate you guys taking the class. That means a lot.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
All right. Y'all take care. Appreciate it.